Imagine holding in your hand a coin that carries the weight of American history, a coin that has witnessed the passing of generations, a coin that marked the very beginning years of one of the most iconic designs in United States coinage we are. Talking about the 1939 Jefferson Nickel, a piece of money that is far more than just 5 cents. It is a gateway into the past, a reflection of art politics and the economy of its time, and a story that blends numismatic beauty with the struggles of a changing nation. To understand the importance of the 1939 Jefferson Nickel, we must go back to its origins and examine why this coin came into being at all. For decades before its arrival, the 5-cent denomination was dominated by the buffalo. Nickel, designed by James Earl Fraser, the buffalo. Nickel, first released in 1913, was beloved for its rugged portrayal of a Native American on the obverse and the American bison on the reverse. Yet as years went on, mint officials began to complain about the practicality of the design. The buffalo nickel was notoriously difficult to strike properly. The details often wore down quickly, and the design presented challenges for long-term coinage use. By the mid-1930s, the United States Mint had already been preparing to replace it, and that is when the call for a new design emerged. The Treasury announced a competition inviting artists to submit their concepts for the new 5-cent coin. The challenge was to honor one of the nation's great leaders. And so the focus turned to Thomas Jefferson, author of the Declaration of Independence, third President of the United States and founder of the University of Virginia. His home Monticello would also become part of the design. The winner of the competition was Felix Schlag, a German-born sculptor who immigrated to the United States. His vision was chosen over hundreds of submissions, and the Jefferson Nickel was born in 1938. But the year 1939 was the first full year of wide production, and thus holds a very special place in history. This year was also critical because it marked the first significant adjustments to the design, and these small but important differences would go on to intrigue collectors for generations. The 1939 Jefferson Nickel comes in two primary reverse varieties, one with a reverse of 1938 style and the other with an improved reverse of 1940 style. The difference lies in the lettering and detail on Monticello. In the first version, the letters in Monticello and 5 cents are weak and curved, while in the later variety they were sharpened and strengthened. This seemingly small detail has created one of the most fascinating collectible points for this coin, and it is why 1939 nickels are so heavily studied within numismatics. As we move deeper into the historical context, the world of 1939 was a turbulent one. America was emerging from the Great Depression. Europe was plunging into the beginning stages of World War II, and the role of coinage became more than just commerce. It became a symbol of stability. The Jefferson Nickel was a fresh design meant to bring pride to the American people. Its smooth, clean portrait of Jefferson facing left with Monticello on the back gave the coin a sense of dignity. It was modern yet classical, and it represented ideals of leadership and home. Jefferson was not just any president. He was a philosopher, a scientist, and a farmer. His image on a coin meant that Americans were reminded daily of values tied to liberty, knowledge, and perseverance. The mintage of 1939 nickels was also notable. They were struck at 3 mints, Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, each carrying unique mintages and unique stories. The Philadelphia Mint produced the largest numbers, while the San Francisco issues were fewer in quantity, and today they are scarcer in higher grades. Collectors often prize the 1939D and 1939S nickels as tougher finds, especially in uncirculated condition, while Philadelphia issues provide an excellent entry point for collectors studying varieties. One of the most important varieties is the 1939 doubled Monticello and doubled 5 cents variety, a doubled die reverse that shows strong doubling on the inscriptions. This error coin is one of the most famous varieties in the entire Jefferson series and continues to command high prices at auction. The doubled die error happened when the working die received more than one misaligned impression from the hub, creating a dramatic, doubling effect. Such varieties have fascinated collectors for decades because they reveal the very process of how coins are made. Mistakes become treasures, and in this case, the 1939 doubled die reverse is one of the crown jewels of the Jefferson Nickel series. As we analyze the artistry, we must also consider Felix Schlag's role. His original submission actually included a more classical and stylized Monticello with a side view, but Mint officials requested changes to make it more realistic. He also proposed a palm tree design in the background, but this was rejected. The final design we see today was a compromise between his artistic vision and the government's requirements. Schlag himself would not receive great fame during his lifetime, but his work continues to live in every Jefferson Nickel struck since 1938. In terms of condition rarity, the 1939 nickel presents challenges for collectors. While millions were made, few survived in pristine condition due to weak strikes. And circulation, many nickels from this year show soft details, especially on Jefferson's hair and Monticello's steps. Collectors often pursue full steps examples, a designation meaning that all the steps on Monticello are sharply defined such. Coins are incredibly scarce for 1939, and they are highly prized by advanced numismatists. The pursuit of full steps nickels has become a hobby within itself because it requires immense patience and knowledge in searching for well-struck examples. While most coins circulated heavily during the time and wore down quickly, the few that remain untouched in mint state condition shine as historical relics, representing the ideal of perfection in minting beyond the numismatic technicalities. The 1939 Jefferson Nickel also embodies American culture of the late 1930s. It was a time when radio-dominated households, swing music filled dance halls, and cars like the Ford Deluxe roamed the streets. Yet beneath this energy loomed the threat of global war. The Jefferson Nickel circulated in a world of uncertainty, serving as a small but constant reminder of American heritage and leadership. Thomas Jefferson's face symbolized not only money, but also ideals that the United States was striving to uphold. As the 1939 nickel spread through commerce, it touched the lives of millions buying food, paying for transportation exchanged in shops and banks. It was handled by farmers, factory workers, children saving coins in jars, and soldiers. Soon, to be called into service during the coming war, the Jefferson Nickel became a part of daily life. Its durability and wide circulation ensured that nearly every American would encounter it, thus making it a truly national coin. The legacy of the 1939 Jefferson Nickel is vast. It is a coin of firsts, a coin of varieties, a coin of artistry, and a coin of history. It bridges the end of the Buffalo nickel era and the rise of a modern American design. It carries the story of Felix Schlag, his triumph, and compromise. It reflects the nation's journey from depression to wartime economy. It is a small metal disc, yet a powerful symbol of endurance and identity. Collectors today continue to study it, cherish it, and build collections around its varieties. And Mintage's auction houses feature it regularly, and error specialists never tire of analyzing its doubled dies and full-step strikes. The Jefferson Nickel series would continue largely unchanged for decades, making the 1939 issue stand out even more as a key moment in its evolution as you look at the coin. Remember, it is not merely 5 cents. It is a window into the past, a conversation between history and art, and a bridge between generations. That is the story of the 1939 Jefferson Nickel, a coin that deserves respect, fascination, and a permanent place in the chronicles of American numismatics. Imagine holding in your hand a coin that represents not only a small piece of American currency, but also a window into the history of the United States. During one of its most turbulent decades, the Jefferson Nickel, minted in 1968, is more than just a 5-cent piece. It is a reflection of American culture, politics, economics, and artistry from the time of its creation to the modern era. And when we talk about the 1968 Jefferson Nickel, we step into a fascinating story that ties together the legacy of Thomas Jefferson, the craftsmanship of Felix Schlag, who designed the coin in the late 1930s, and the broader events of the late 1960s that shaped America in ways that are still felt today. The year 1968 was a year of transformation and turmoil in the United States. The country was dealing with the aftermath of the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Robert F. Kennedy. The Vietnam War was raging. Protests were erupting across college campuses, and American society was grappling with questions of civil rights, democracy, and its place in the world. In this charged atmosphere, the Mint continued its responsibility of producing coinage for everyday commerce, and among the most familiar pieces struck during that year was the Jefferson nickel, first introduced in 1938 as a replacement for the Buffalo nickel. The Jefferson nickel was designed by German-born sculptor Felix Schlag, who won a national competition to design the coin in 1938. The obverse features a left-facing portrait of Thomas Jefferson, the third President of the United States, author of the Declaration of Independence, and a central figure in American democracy. The reverse features his famous Virginia estate Monticello, which Jefferson himself designed and which stands as a symbol of his intellect and his contradictions, as both an advocate for liberty and a man who owned enslaved people by 1968. Schlag's design had been circulating for 3 decades, and the coin had become a trusted staple in American pockets, purses, and cash registers. Now, what makes the 1968 Jefferson nickel particularly interesting is not just the design itself, but the context of minting in that specific year. Prior to 1968, all proof coins had been struck. In Philadelphia, however, beginning in 1968, proof production was moved permanently to the San Francisco Mint. This marked a turning point in the history of American coinage. The 1968 proof, Jefferson nickels struck at San Francisco with the S Mint mark, became the very first modern proof coins to carry that designation. Collectors instantly recognized these pieces as significant because they marked the revival of proof coinage after a 3-year hiatus between 1965 and 1967. During that suspension, proof and uncirculated mint sets were replaced with so-called special mint sets, which did not achieve the same level of mirror-like finish and sharp detail that collectors loved. The return of proof coins in 1968, with the Jefferson nickel leading the way, restored a sense of artistry and tradition to American numismatics. The circulation strikes of the 1968 nickel also have a story of their own. The coins were minted at 3 facilities: Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco. Unlike Philadelphia nickels of earlier years, which carried no mint mark, the 1968 issues introduced a permanent change. All mint marks now appeared on the obverse of the coin, just below Jefferson's portrait on the right side near the rim. This was a significant modification, because for decades the placement of mint marks had been a subject of debate, and in 1965 the Mint had even removed mint marks entirely to discourage coin hoarding during a nationwide shortage. When the mint marks returned in 1968, their new position on the obverse signaled both a design shift and a renewed sense of transparency for collectors and the general public. In terms of mintage, the 1968 nickels struck at Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco circulated widely and were used in everyday commerce across the country. These were not rare in general circulation, but certain varieties and conditions became valuable over time. For example, proof strikes from San Francisco that were particularly well preserved or featured deep cameo contrasts between frosted devices and mirrored fields grew in demand among collectors. Similarly, circulation strikes with full steps on the Monticello reverse, a grading designation that refers to sharp and complete detail in the depiction of the steps, became especially sought after, since most coins did not strike with that level of clarity due to the Mint's high-speed production. Understanding the historical role of the 1968 nickel also requires a look at how coinage fit into the broader economic situation of the late 1960s. Inflation was beginning to take hold, and the United States was still adjusting to the removal of silver from its coinage earlier in the decade, while nickels never contained silver, except for the wartime alloy years. Between 1942 and 1945, when nickel was needed for the war effort, the public had grown accustomed to seeing design and compositional changes across coin denominations. The Jefferson nickel stood as one of the few coins whose design and metallic composition remained unchanged during this time. Its stability provided a kind of continuity amidst economic uncertainty. Collectors often point out that the 1968 Jefferson nickel is a coin of transitions. It represents the transition from Philadelphia to San Francisco, for proof strikes the transition of mint mark placement to the obverse, the transition back to proof production after the special mint set years, and the broader transition of America itself through a decade of upheaval and change. While a single 5-cent piece may seem insignificant, it reflects the story of a nation striving to balance tradition with change and stability with innovation. To truly appreciate the 1968 Jefferson nickel, you have to think about the layers of meaning it carries at the surface. It is simply a common coin struck in the millions and used in daily transactions at gas stations, diners, and grocery stores. But for numismatists, it is an artifact of design, history, monetary policy, and cultural symbolism. The details of its production, the choices made by the mint, and the reception by collectors all combine to give this coin a depth that extends far beyond its face value. By the time you finish studying the history of the 1968 Jefferson nickel, you realize that no coin exists in isolation. Every detail, from the placement of a mint mark to the shine of a proof finish, tells a story about the people who made it, the time in which it was struck, and the values that shaped the nation. And that is why, when you hold a 1968 nickel in your hand, you are not just holding a piece of metal, you are holding a chapter in American history. Imagine holding in your hand a piece of American history that has been passed from generation to generation, a coin that on the surface seems ordinary, but beneath its simple copper-nickel composition carries a story of art, politics, economy, and cultural identity. This is the story of the 1981 Jefferson Nickel, a coin that belongs to one of the most recognized and longest-running series in United States. Coinage history, the Jefferson Nickel series introduced in 1938 has been a cornerstone of American change for decades, and by the time the 1981 issue was struck, it had already carried the image of the third president of the United States, Thomas Jefferson, for over 40 years. Yet what makes the 1981 nickel stand out is not just its place in a long line of production, but the deeper context of its creation, the state of the U.S. Mint, at the time the economic conditions of the country, the evolving role of coinage in commerce, and the numismatic traits that collectors still study. To this day, to fully appreciate the 1981 Jefferson Nickel, we must begin with its origins. The design created by sculptor Felix Schlag, who won the 1938 design competition, remained largely unchanged through 1981. His obverse portrait of Jefferson, with a left-facing profile and his reverse featuring Monticello Jefferson's Virginia home, was selected for its simplicity, strength, and resonance with national pride. In 1981, the United States Mint continued to produce this design as part of its circulation coinage without dramatic alteration, but the year was significant for other reasons in numismatic terms and in broader American history. The composition of the 1981 Jefferson Nickel remained the same as it had since 1946, a copper nickel. Alloy consisting of 75% copper and 25% nickel, chosen for durability and resistance to wear. This was essential because nickels circulated heavily in everyday commerce, in vending machines, in bus fare, and in daily retail transactions. The diameter was 21.2 millimeters, and the weight was 5 grams, specifications that remained unchanged across decades and made the nickel a dependable coin for the American public. But if the physical aspects of the 1981 nickel were consistent, the minting conditions of the time were not. The U.S. Mint operated multiple facilities, most notably Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco. In 1981, the Philadelphia Mint struck coins without a mint mark, while Denver coins bore the D mark and San Francisco struck proof. Issues with the S mint mark collectors today value the differences between these issues, the sharpness of strike, the presence of proof qualities, and the variations in condition that distinguish a well-preserved coin from one that has been heavily circulated in 1981. The economy of the United States was undergoing stress. Inflation was a persistent issue, and interest rates were historically high. This economic backdrop affected the way Americans viewed money and coinage, while paper currency increasingly dominated large transactions. Coins remained central to small-scale exchanges. The nickel had a practical importance that cannot be overlooked. It was a coin that bridged the gap between the penny and the dime, and as such, it had a constant presence in every pocket and cash register across the country. The mintage figures of the 1981 Jefferson Nickel are also revealing, with hundreds of millions of coins produced at both Philadelphia and Denver. The 1981 issue was not a rarity at the time, but as decades passed, attrition, circulation, and loss reduced the number of high-grade specimens surviving in pristine condition today. This makes mint state and proof examples from 1981 particularly desirable to numismatists who seek out coins with strong luster-clean fields and sharp strikes. Beyond the technical production, we must look at the artistry and symbolism that the coin carried. Jefferson's portrait served as a reminder of the nation's founding principles, his role in drafting the Declaration of Independence, and his vision for an agrarian democracy. The reverse Monticello not only honored Jefferson's home, but stood as an emblem of architecture, culture, and innovation in American history in 1981 as the nation prepared to enter a decade of change. These images on the nickel reinforced a sense of continuity with the past, while also serving as everyday reminders of American identity. Collectors examining the 1981 Jefferson Nickel also find interest in varieties and errors struck off-center, doubled, die reverses, filled mint marks, or planche flaws. Each error tells a story of the minting process and carries a premium in value for specialists who devote their study to Jefferson nickels, in particular proof. Coins from San Francisco in 1981 represent a peak of craftsmanship with mirror-like fields, frosted devices, and presentation quality strikes that set them apart from circulation strikes. As time moved forward, the Jefferson nickel would eventually undergo redesigns, most notably beginning in 2004 with the Westward Journey series, and then with the 2006 return to a forward-facing Jefferson portrait. But in 1981, the design was stable and unchanged, part of the enduring consistency of mid-20th century coinage in the United States. This makes the 1981 nickel a fascinating study piece. It reflects both stability and subtle variation within the greater arc of numismatic history. So when you hold a 1981 Jefferson nickel, you are not simply holding a coin. You are holding a piece of 1980s America, a symbol of a turbulent economy, a reminder of Jefferson's legacy, and a continuation of a design that had been familiar to Americans for generations. To craft a 2-hour exploration of this coin, we would trace its origins, its minting process, its economic context, the role of coinage in daily life, its varieties and errors, its place in the broader Jefferson Nickel series, and its legacy for modern collectors. It is a journey through artistry, economy, history, and collecting passion, all contained within the simple 5-cent piece that most people overlook. Yet for those who study it, the 1981 Jefferson Nickel is anything but ordinary. Imagine holding in your hand a small piece of American history, a coin that has survived decades of change, from the aftermath of the Second World War through the Cold War civil rights struggles and modern digital transformations, and yet it remains a silent witness to all of it. This is not just a nickel, it is the Jefferson Nickel of 1946, and it tells a story far greater than its 5-cent face value. Collectors, historians, and everyday Americans may look at this coin as ordinary, but when you dig deep into its design, production, and historical context, you realize this coin represents resilience, transition, and national identity. The Jefferson nickel had been first introduced in 1938, replacing the Buffalo nickel, and was designed by sculptor Felix Schlag, who won the design competition. Schlag's portrait of Thomas Jefferson, facing left with a dignified expression, was chosen to symbolize America's third president, author of the Declaration of Independence, and a key architect of democratic ideals. The reverse depicted Jefferson's Monticello estate, with its neoclassical architecture standing as a monument to Jefferson's vision of liberty and enlightenment. Thinking by 1946, the Jefferson nickel had already endured a crucial change during World War II when the United States altered the composition of the coin to preserve nickel metal for the war effort from mid-1942 to 1945. Nickels contained an alloy of copper, silver, and manganese, rather than the traditional copper-nickel blend. These were known as war nickels, and they carried a distinctive large mint mark above Monticello to indicate the change. When the war ended in 1945, the United States faced the monumental task of transitioning from wartime production to peacetime. Industry factories that had once built tanks and planes returned to producing consumer goods. Soldiers returned home, and America entered an era of optimism yet uncertainty. The 1946 Jefferson nickel became the first year in which the coin returned to its original pre-war composition of 75% copper and 25% nickel. It was both a return to normalcy and a marker of post-war recovery. The Philadelphia Mint, the Denver Mint, and the San Francisco Mint all struck 1946 nickels, with mintages in the hundreds of millions reflecting a growing economy and the need for circulating coinage to support the post-war boom. The Philadelphia Mint struck the highest mintage at over 161 million pieces. The Denver Mint produced around 45 million, while San Francisco added nearly 14 million, making the S-Mint coins the scarcest of the three in circulation at the time. Collectors today note that while the 1946 nickel is common in lower circulated grades, high-grade uncirculated examples with full steps, details on Monticello are far more elusive. This is due to the quality of striking during the period where weak strikes often plagued Jefferson nickels. Full steps designations are especially prized by collectors and can command significant premiums. The year 1946 itself adds to the historical weight of this coin. America was emerging as a global superpower. The United Nations had just been founded in 1945, and the United States was leading post-war reconstruction. Under the Marshall Plan domestically, the GI Bill was helping returning veterans pursue education and buy homes. Suburbanization was beginning, and the American economy was shifting toward consumer prosperity. In this context, the Jefferson nickel circulated in the pockets of citizens buying groceries, paying bus fares, and fueling the everyday lives of Americans who were stepping into a new chapter of national life. From a design perspective, the coin remained unchanged, with Jefferson's profile on the obverse and Monticello on the reverse. Yet it carried symbolic importance. Jefferson's legacy as a champion of liberty was highlighted in a time when America was positioning itself as the leader of the free world, in contrast to the growing tensions with the Soviet Union that would soon escalate into the Cold War. The nickel's metallic return from silver wartime alloy to copper-nickel blend also symbolized peace, stability, and economic normalcy. Once again, Americans could handle a nickel that looked and felt like the ones before the war for collectors. The 1946 Jefferson nickel represents a pivotal transitional issue. It is not rare in the sense of low mintage, but its historical positioning as the first peacetime nickel after the war makes it significant. The San Francisco Mint issues are scarcer and more challenging to find in higher grades, which adds collecting interest, while error varieties, such as repunched mint marks or doubled dies, though not extremely common, do exist and provide specialists with unique challenges and rewards in building sets. To fully appreciate the 1946 nickel, one must also place it in the broader timeline of the Jefferson nickel series. The early years from 1938 to 1941 saw The introduction and establishment of Schlag's design. Then the war years from 1942 to 1945 introduced the silver alloy nickels, which have always fascinated collectors for their wartime context. Then 1946 marked the return to the classic alloy and symbolized the nation's shift to peacetime. By the late 1940s and into the 1950s, Jefferson nickels would continue to circulate widely, becoming one of the most familiar and stable denominations in American coinage history, beyond numismatics. The 1946 nickel tells us about the psychology of a nation. Coins are daily objects handled by millions, yet they capture the mood of their time. In 1946, the nation was filled with optimism and rebuilding energy. The soldiers were back, industries were booming, and coins like the Jefferson nickel were the currency of this prosperity. Each one circulated in countless hands, buying newspapers, ice cream sodas, streetcar tickets, and small luxuries that symbolized the return of peace. In the decades since, the 1946 nickel has become a staple of collections, especially for those building complete Jefferson nickel sets from 1938 onward. Its value in circulated condition remains modest, but in uncirculated condition with sharp details and lustrous surfaces, it can fetch strong prices. Registry set collectors especially seek out coins with full steps designations, as these demonstrate the pinnacle of quality and strike precision from an era when such coins were not easy to produce. When you look closely at a 1946 Jefferson nickel, you see more than metal. You see the transition from war to peace, from scarcity to abundance, from uncertainty to optimism. You see the image of Thomas Jefferson, whose ideals continued to inspire a post-war America charting its destiny on the world stage. You see Monticello standing firm like the Republic itself, resilient after global conflict. And you see the craftsmanship of the United States Mint, resuming traditional practices after